I found out. My best friend was helping my husband cheat, so I gave them both a lesson that made them. My name is Georgine. I'm 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life with my loving husband James and my loyal best friend Alison. That was before I discovered their betrayal that shattered my world. What they never expected was how calculated and devastating my response would be. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button while I reveal how I turned their secret affair into a public lesson they'll never forget. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston. My parents worked hard to give me and my younger brother everything we needed. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I was raised with solid values and a strong work ethic. Those values carried me through design school, where I put in countless hours studying while working part-time jobs to cover my expenses. I met James at a charity gala 9 years ago. I was there helping with the decor as part of an internship, and he was attending as a guest through his pharmaceutical company. James wasn't like the other corporate guys there. He seemed genuinely interested in the charity's cause and spoke passionately about healthcare access for underprivileged communities. When he approached me with a glass of champagne and complimented my design work, I was instantly drawn to him. Our courtship was like something out of a romance novel. James would surprise me with thoughtful gifts related to my design interests. Once he took me to an exclusive furniture exhibition because he knew I'd been talking about new sustainable materials. He remembered the small details, asked about my day, and made me feel valued in a way no man ever had before. 2 years after we met, James proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. We were walking along the beach at sunset when he got down on one knee. The ring was perfect. A vintage-style diamond that he knew I would prefer over something flashy and modern. I said yes through tears of joy, and we celebrated that night by calling all our loved ones, with Alison being the very first person I called. Our Alison, my best friend since we were 12 years old. We met in middle school when we were paired as lab partners in science class. She was the outgoing one who brought me out of my shell, and I was the sensible one who kept her wildest ideas in check. Through high school crushes, college struggles, and early career failures, we were each other's constant support system. When I told Alison about the engagement, she screamed so loudly over the phone that I had to hold it away from my ear. She immediately volunteered to be my maid of honor and promised to throw me the most amazing bridal shower and bachelorette party. True to her word, she went above and beyond, organizing everything perfectly. At my wedding, her toast brought everyone to tears as she recounted our decades of friendship and welcomed James into our little circle. After the wedding, James and I bought our dream home in an upscale Boston suburb. It was a charming colonial with great bones but outdated interiors, which was perfect for me since I could put my design skills to work. We spent weekends painting walls, installing new fixtures, and making it ours. Alison was there too, helping us strip wallpaper and bringing lunch when we were too busy to cook. As the years passed, my interior design business took off. What started as a small operation out of our spare bedroom grew into a respected studio with 3 employees. I specialized in sustainable luxury using eco-friendly materials without sacrificing elegance. Boston Magazine even featured my work, calling me one of the city's designers to watch. James was so proud, framing the article and hanging it in our foyer. James's career was flourishing too. He moved up quickly at his pharmaceutical company, becoming a regional sales manager within 5 years. His job required occasional travel to medical conferences and meetings with important clients. I didn't mind his trips. At first, they were never more than 2 or 3 days, and we always made up for lost time when he returned. Our social life revolved around a close-knit group of friends, including Alison and her boyfriend Tyler. They had been together nearly as long as James and I, though they weren't married. Every couple of weeks, we would rotate hosting dinner parties at our homes. James was an excellent cook, and I loved setting a beautiful table with seasonal decorations. Alison and Tyler were fixtures at these gatherings, along with a few other couples we'd grown close to. James and I had our routines and traditions that made our marriage feel special. Sunday brunches where we would try new recipes while listening to jazz records. Annual trips to different national parks, collecting a magnet from each one. We talked about having children, soon always pushing it back, as our careers demanded more attention. I thought we had all the time in the world. Looking back, I can see the first subtle changes that I dismissed at the time. Around our 5th anniversary, James started taking more frequent work trips, where he used to text me regularly throughout the day. When away, his communications became briefer and less frequent. He claimed the meetings were intense and packed with networking events. I believed him. When James was home, he became protective of his phone, something that had never been an issue before. If I walked into a room while he was texting, he would quickly put the phone down or turn it over. Once, when I asked to use his phone because mine was charging, he seemed nervous but handed it over. I didn't think to check his messages then. Why would I? I trusted him completely. I noticed small changes in our intimate life too. James introduced new moves that we'd never tried before. At the time, I was flattered that he still wanted to spice things up after years together. It never occurred to me that someone else might be teaching him these things. Even with these subtle shifts, I remained blissfully ignorant of what was brewing beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. I trusted James with my whole heart, and I trusted Alison just as much. That's what makes their betrayal all the more devastating. The two people I loved most in the world were the ones who would hurt me the deepest. The first real suspicion hit me during a weekend when James said he needed to attend an emergency sales conference in New York. It was so sudden that it struck me as odd, but he assured me it was crucial for a new product launch. That same weekend, Alison mentioned she was going to visit her college roommate in New Jersey. The timing didn't register as suspicious then. When James returned, something felt different. He had a new cologne, one I didn't buy him, and he hadn't mentioned purchasing. When I asked about it, he said a sales rep at the conference was giving out samples. It seemed plausible enough, but combined with other small changes, it planted a seed of doubt. The passwords on his phone and laptop changed around the same time. We used to know each other's passcodes not because we snooped, but for practicality. When I mentioned it casually, James claimed it was a company security protocol. Again, the explanation made sense, but something felt off. His work trips increased in frequency and duration. What used to be occasional overnight stays turned into weekend-long conferences and Thursday to Monday business trips. The explanations became vaguer with mentions of important clients he couldn't name due to confidentiality agreements. Alison's behaviour changed too. She had always been James's advocate in our friend group, appreciating how good he was to me, but it intensified in a way that felt strange. When I shared small frustrations about James working late or missing a dinner with friends, Alison would quickly jump to his defence. "His job is so demanding, Georgine. You should be proud of how hard he works," she would say, with an intensity that seemed disproportionate. I remember a specific dinner party at our house where I caught an exchange between them that made my stomach twist. It was nothing explicit, just a glance that lasted a beat too long, a silent communication that excluded everyone else in the room. When Alison realized I was watching, she quickly looked away and became overly animated in her conversation with Tyler. My anxiety grew, creating a constant undercurrent in my daily life. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake, analysing James's behaviour and words for inconsistencies. But I kept dismissing my concerns, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, this was James, my husband of 7 years, and Alison, my best friend since childhood, the people I trusted most in the world. One evening, I came home early from a client meeting to find James on the phone in our bedroom. He didn't hear me come in, and I overheard him say, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I've made reservations at that place you love." When he noticed me standing in the doorway, he quickly ended the call with, Okay, so the meeting's confirmed for tomorrow. I'll bring the presentation materials. The panic in his eyes told me everything. That night, I confronted him about the call and his recent behavior changes. James became defensive immediately. "You're spying on me now. I can't believe you don't trust me after all these years." He turned it around, making me the villain for questioning him. "It's just work stress, Georgine. Maybe you should talk to someone about these trust issues." By the end of the conversation, I was apologizing to him, doubting my own instincts. Confused and hurt, I did what I had always done. When troubled, I called Alison. We met for coffee the next day, and I poured out my concerns. Her reaction was strange, a mixture of discomfort and forced reassurance. "James adores you, Georgine. Men get weird sometimes with work pressure. Maybe give him some space." She avoided eye contact while saying this, fidgeting with her coffee cup. When I mentioned the phone call, I overheard her face paled slightly before she composed herself. "It sounds like a work thing to me. Don't create problems where there aren't any." Her dismissal felt like a betrayal itself. After that conversation, I started paying closer attention to our finances. Reviewing our joint credit card statements, I found charges at hotels on days James claimed to be at day-long meetings in neighbouring states. There were also expensive restaurant bills for two at establishments known for their romantic atmosphere. When questioned, James had explanations for everything. The hotel charges were for conference rooms he booked for client meetings. The restaurant bills were for taking clients to dinner. He had receipts and email confirmations that seemed to back up his stories. I later discovered these were carefully doctored. The moment that solidified my suspicions came when I was doing laundry one Sunday afternoon. As I was checking pockets before washing James's shirts, I found a business card with a hotel room number written on the back. That itself wasn't unusual for a travelling salesman. What caught my eye was the smudge of lipstick on his collar, a distinctive shade of mauve that I recognised immediately as Alison's favourite. I had given her that exact lipstick for her birthday the previous year. The lipstick could have been explained away by an innocent hug, but combined with everything else, it sent my mind racing. I sat on our bedroom floor, shirt in hand, as the possibility I had been avoiding crashed over me like a wave. Could my husband and best friend be betraying me together? That night, I lay awake beside James, studying his sleeping face, wondering if everything I thought we had was a lie. I felt sick, heartbroken, but also determined. If my worst fears were true, I needed to know for certain. No more gaslighting, no more dismissing my instincts. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I'm not naturally suspicious or vindictive, but when your entire world comes into question, you find strengths you never knew you had. I decided to approach this like one of my design projects, methodically and thoroughly, gathering information before making any decisions. First, I needed access to James's phone. One evening, I suggested we watch a movie together and made his favourite cocktails, slightly stronger than usual. When he fell asleep on the couch, I carefully used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. I installed a tracking app that would show me his location without alerting him, disguising it as a system update. I felt a twinge of guilt, but reminded myself that I wouldn't be doing this if there weren't legitimate reasons for concern. The app proved invaluable. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented multiple occasions where James's location didn't match where he claimed to be. The moment that confirmed my worst fears came when I checked the app during one of his supposed 3-day conferences in Philadelphia. According to the tracker, he was at a boutique hotel in the Berkshires, a romantic getaway spot. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, Alison had told our friend group she was having a girls' weekend with college friends in the same area. A quick social media check showed no posts from any of her college friends about a reunion. When I casually texted her asking about a design question for a client, she responded that she was still in Boston, just swamped with work. The lies were piling up from both of them. I needed more concrete evidence. Looking through our shared cloud storage, I found a folder James thought was hidden containing text messages he had backed up from his phone. There, in black and white, was their betrayal, documented in hundreds of messages spanning months. They used coded language, calling their rendezvous business meetings and study sessions, but the content was unmistakable. "Can't wait to continue our discussion about those spreadsheets," James would write, with Alison responding, "I've prepared some special charts for your review." It would have been laughable if it weren't so heartbreaking. The texts revealed something even more painful. Alison had been actively helping James create alibis and cover stories. "Tell Georgine you have that client dinner Thursday so we can meet earlier," she suggested in one message. "I've already mentioned my book club to Tyler for that night." They were coordinating their deceptions, working as a team to fool both me and Tyler. Despite all this evidence, I wanted to be absolutely certain. I hired a private investigator using money from my personal business account that James couldn't track. I felt like I was living in a bad movie, but I needed documentation that couldn't be explained away or denied. The investigator delivered within a week. Photos showed James and Alison entering a hotel together, holding hands in the parking lot, where they thought no one would see them kissing in a restaurant booth in a town 40 miles from Boston. The final evidence was a video clip of them in the hotel bar, James's hand on Alison's thigh, her head thrown back in laughter as they shared some private joke, probably at my expense. The investigator also uncovered email exchanges between them, obtained through legal methods he didn't fully explain. These emails were perhaps the most hurtful evidence, as they discussed their affair and their feelings for each other in explicit detail. "Georgine suspects nothing," James wrote in one email. "She's so wrapped up in her design projects, she barely notices when I'm gone anymore." Alison replied, "Tyler's clueless too. It's almost too easy. When are we going to figure out what to do about them? I want us to be together for real." They discussed their affair as if it were a business venture with strategies and timelines. Alison had apparently been orchestrating much of it, making the hotel reservations under her name for work events, to avoid suspicion, creating fake design consultations when they wanted afternoon meetups, even keeping a change of clothes in her car for their rendezvous. One email thread revealed that Alison had been the one to suggest their affair in the first place. During a moment when James had confided in her about a rough patch in our marriage, a rough patch I wasn't even aware existed. Instead of supporting her friend of 20 years, she had seen an opportunity and taken it. The most devastating discovery was an email where they discussed a future together. They weren't just having a casual fling, they were making plans to leave Tyler and me once they figured out the least messy way to do it. They talked about which of our friends would pick sides and how to manage the fallout. My life was being dismantled in bullet points and action items by the two people I trusted most. After gathering all this evidence, I went to my design studio and locked the door. I allowed myself one complete breakdown, sobbing on the floor until I had no tears left. 7 years of marriage and 20 years of friendship, all built on sand. I screamed until my throat was raw, threw a ceramic vase against the wall, and collapsed in exhaustion. When I woke up on the studio couch hours later, something had shifted inside me. The sadness was still there, but it was overshadowed by a cold, clear determination. They had meticulously planned their betrayal. Now I would plan my response with even greater care. They wanted to control the narrative of our breakup. They had no idea what was coming. My immediate instinct was to confront them both, to scream and rage and demand answers. But that wouldn't serve me well in the long run. A direct confrontation would give them time to create more lies, to paint me as the unstable, jealous wife and friend. No, this required strategic thinking. I started by consulting with a divorce lawyer, someone with no connections to our social circle. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who had seen every type of betrayal imaginable. Document everything, she advised. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but evidence of adultery can impact property division and alimony if the judge sees that marital assets were used to facilitate the affair. Following her advice, I created detailed records of all James's unexplained absences, the money spent on hotels and restaurants with Alison, and the false work trips that were company time used for personal purposes. I made copies of all texts, emails, and photos, storing them both physically in a safe deposit box at a new bank and digitally in a secure cloud account James knew nothing about. I also documented our financial situation thoroughly. I printed statements of all our accounts, made copies of property deeds, insurance policies, investment portfolios, and retirement accounts. I tracked down the paperwork for the artwork and antiques we had collected over the years. If this was going to end in divorce, I wanted a complete picture of our marital assets. On my lawyer's recommendation, I opened a separate bank account and began transferring reasonable amounts from my business earnings into it. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to give me financial independence when everything exploded. I also secured my personal documents, birth certificate, passport, social security card, moving them from our home office to my studio. I reached out to a few trusted friends outside our immediate social circle, people who had known me before James and had no loyalty conflicts. I didn't tell them everything, just that I was having serious marriage problems and might need support soon. Having allies would be crucial in the aftermath. Next, I researched the policies at James's pharmaceutical company. As I suspected, they had strict rules about professional conduct, including clear prohibitions against using company time and resources for personal affairs. His falsified business trips weren't just a betrayal of me, they were workplace fraud. Similarly, I looked into the ethics guidelines at Alison's marketing firm, finding that they had a morality clause that could potentially be relevant. I also learned about alienation of affection laws. While Massachusetts doesn't recognize these claims, the emotional aspect could still play into divorce proceedings, especially if I could prove Alison actively facilitated the destruction of my marriage rather than just being the other woman. With my legal and financial preparations in place, I began crafting a 3-phase plan that would expose their betrayal while protecting my interests. The goal wasn't just revenge, it was justice and a clean break that would leave me in the strongest possible position to rebuild my life. Phase 1 involved continued financial preparation and strategic information gathering. I began moving important personal items to a storage unit, things with sentimental value that I couldn't bear to lose in a contentious divorce family, photos, jewelry from my grandmother journals, and mementos from before I met James. I did this slowly, a few items at a time, nothing that would be immediately noticed. I also began laying groundwork for my business to operate independently. I updated my portfolio website, reached out to strengthen connections with contractors and vendors, and ensured all my client relationships were solid. My design studio might become my only source of income and stability soon. As cover for all these preparations, I pretended to be planning a surprise anniversary trip for James and me. Our 8th anniversary was 3 months away, far enough to explain my secretive behavior, but close enough to seem plausible. This provided the perfect excuse for researching destinations, making mysterious phone calls, and being protective of my browsing history. I even strategically mentioned this surprise trip to James's boss during a company event, commenting how excited I was to finally pin down James for an uninterrupted vacation after all his hard work traveling. "He's been logging so many miles lately," I said innocently. "Philadelphia, New York, Chicago." I listed places he had claimed to visit, but hadn't. His boss's confused expression told me what I needed to know. The trips weren't company sanctioned. I also invited Alison's boyfriend Tyler for coffee, ostensibly to get his input on anniversary gift ideas for James. During our conversation, I casually brought up some dates when I was considering booking the trip. "Would you and Alison want to join us for part of it?" I was thinking the second weekend in April. Tyler frowned slightly and mentioned that Alison had told him she had a work conference that weekend. Another lie exposed. The hardest part of the planning phase was maintaining normalcy at home. I had to pretend nothing was wrong to smile at James over dinner as he told me about his fabricated workday, to laugh at his jokes and respond to his affection. Some nights after he fell asleep, I would stand in the shower, letting the water mask my tears, rehearsing confrontations in my head that I wasn't yet ready to have. I created a fake business trip of my own, telling James I needed to meet with suppliers in Chicago for new, sustainable materials. This gave me 3 days to meet with my lawyer again, finalize divorce paperwork, set up a temporary apartment, and put the final touches on my plan. The irony of using his own tactic against him wasn't lost on me. My plan was coming together, but I needed one last piece of evidence, something so undeniable that neither James nor Alison could wriggle out of it with more lies. I contacted the private investigator again and asked him to document their next rendezvous in full detail, following them from initial meetup to hotel check-in. I wanted a complete timeline that could be matched against their lies to me and Tyler about where they were. While the PI worked, I set up a fake emergency situation. I asked my brother, who lived across the country and rarely called James directly, to phone him with an urgent message about me having a car accident. As expected, James didn't answer. His phone turned off during his time with Alison. My brother left a panicked voicemail, then called Alison as the next emergency contact. She didn't answer either. When they both finally returned the calls hours later, they did so separately, each claiming to have been in meetings with poor reception. The calls were recorded with my brother's permission, documenting yet another coordinated lie. With everything in place, I moved to the final phase of my plan, creating the perfect scenario to expose them both. I arranged what appeared to be a surprise party at our home, supposedly for a friend's birthday. In reality, it would be the stage for their public unmasking. I invited our entire social circle, James's colleagues, Alison's co-workers, and even a few family members. Everyone except the supposed birthday friend who was conveniently running late. As the date approached, I felt a strange calm descend over me. The weeks of deception had been exhausting, but I was almost at the finish line. Soon I would reclaim my truth and my dignity. They thought they were so clever, but they had underestimated me severely. They were about to learn that betrayal comes with consequences, and those consequences were finally coming due. The day of the confrontation arrived with perfect spring weather sunshine and clear skies that belied the storm I was about to unleash. I had spent the morning setting up our backyard for the party, stringing lights, arranging flowers, and preparing a beautiful grazing table. Anyone watching would have thought I was simply a dedicated hostess, not a woman about to dismantle her marriage and oldest friendship in front of 30 witnesses. James had been helping all day, completely unaware of what was coming. He moved furniture, hung decorations, and chilled champagne, occasionally kissing my cheek or squeezing my hand, playing the role of devoted husband. Each touch made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure, smiling and thanking him for his help. Alison arrived early as planned, bringing an elaborate cake she had special ordered. "Only the best for the birthday girl," she said with a wink, complicit in what she thought was a surprise for our friend Rachel. She hugged me tightly, and I forced myself to hug her back, wondering how she could embrace me so warmly while carrying such a cold betrayal. Guests began arriving around 6, mingling in our backyard with cocktails and appetizers. James's boss was there, as were several of his colleagues. Alison's boyfriend Tyler came straight from work, greeting Alison with a kiss that made my stomach turn, knowing where her lips had been. Friends from college neighbours and my brother, who had flown in secretly for support, all gathered under the pretense of a birthday celebration. I had arranged for our security system to be connected to the outdoor television screen, claiming we would play a slideshow of Rachel's photos later. In reality, it was set up to display the evidence I had gathered. A long-time client of mine who worked in IT had helped ensure everything would work flawlessly. As twilight approached and everyone was sufficiently relaxed with food and drinks, I clinked my glass to gather attention. James stood beside me, smiling proudly at what he thought was my hosting success. Alison was nearby, her arm linked with Tyler's, completely at ease. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I know you're expecting to surprise Rachel, but she's not actually coming." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. James looked at me questioningly. "The truth is, I've gathered you all here because I recently made a devastating discovery, and rather than hide it or handle it privately, I decided that the people who betrayed me so publicly deserve to be exposed just as publicly." James's smile faltered. Alison's face drained of colour. I could see the moment they both realised what was happening, the panic flashing in their eyes as they glanced at each other briefly, then quickly looked away, trying not to appear connected. For months, my husband James and my best friend Alison have been having an affair behind my back and behind Tyler's back. I pressed a button on my phone, and the television screen came to life, displaying a grid of text messages between them. They coordinated alibis, created fake work events, and lied to everyone in this garden about where they were and what they were doing. I clicked again, and hotel receipts appeared side by side with James's falsified expense reports to his company. The crowd was utterly silent now, all eyes moving between the screen, James, Alison, and me. Tyler had taken a step away from Alison, staring at her with growing horror. "But perhaps you don't believe me. After all, text messages can be faked, right? That's probably what they'll claim." I clicked again, and photos from the private investigator filled the screen, James and Alison holding hands, kissing in a restaurant, entering a hotel together. James stepped forward, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Georgine, stop this right now! You're making a scene over nothing. I can explain these photos." His voice was forceful but undercut with panic. "Can you explain this too?" I clicked again, and video began to play, showing them in intimate conversation, James's hand caressing Alison's face as they sat close together in a hotel bar. The timestamp, clearly visible, showed it was from just 3 days ago, when James had told me he was at a pharmaceutical conference in Baltimore, and Alison had told Tyler she was visiting her sick aunt. "This is insane," James sputtered, looking around at his colleagues, particularly his boss, whose face had hardened into a mask of disapproval. "This is private. We shouldn't be doing this here." "Private?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Like the privacy you respected when you discussed your plans to leave me with Alison, when you used company resources and time to conduct your affair." I clicked again, displaying emails where they explicitly discussed their future plans and how to manage the fallout from our eventual divorces. Alison finally broke, her shocked silence, tears streaming down her face. "Georgine, please, we never meant to hurt you. Things just happened, we couldn't help our feelings." Her voice was pleading, hands reaching toward me as if she could somehow stop what was already in motion. "Things didn't just happen, Alison. You both made choices repeatedly for months. You chose to betray me, to lie to me, to laugh about me behind my back." I turned to face our assembled friends and family. "Did you know that Alison was the one who suggested the affair in the first place? That she made the reservations, created the alibis, kept track of their story so they wouldn't get caught?" I turned back to Alison. 20 years of friendship, and this is how you valued it." My voice finally cracked slightly, the hurt breaking through my composed exterior. Tyler had moved to the opposite side of the garden, his face a mask of fury as he stared at Alison. "Were you ever going to tell me, or just blindside me with divorce papers, once you figured out the least messy way to do it?" he asked, quoting directly from one of their emails. James attempted to regain control of the situation, moving toward me with his hands raised placatingly. "Everyone, please, this is a private matter between Georgine and me. I think it would be best if you all left so we can discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss, James," I said calmly. "I've already filed for divorce. The papers are being delivered to your office tomorrow. I've spoken with a prosecutor about the company fraud using business trips and expense accounts to facilitate your affair. That's embezzlement, technically." His boss stepped forward at this, his expression grim. "James, I think you and I need to have a serious conversation tomorrow morning. 8 a.m., my office." The implications were clear. James's professional reputation was in tatters, along with his personal one. Alison's work situation unravelled just as quickly when one of her colleagues mentioned their firm's morality clause and strict policy against behaviour that reflected poorly on the company. "Using client meeting pretexts for assignations. That's not going to go over well with the partners, Alison," she said coldly. The party dissolved into chaos after that. Some guests left immediately uncomfortable with the public airing of such private matters. Others stayed, some offering me support, others confronting James or Alison with their own feelings of betrayal at being used as unwitting alibis or lied to repeatedly. Through it all, I maintained my composure, thanking people for coming, accepting brief hugs or words of encouragement. Inside, I was shaking, but I refused to break down in front of everyone. I had orchestrated this moment carefully, and I would see it through with dignity. James tried several times to pull me aside for a private conversation, his attempts growing more desperate as more people abandoned him. "You've ruined everything," he hissed during one attempt. Was this public humiliation really necessary? Was sleeping with my best friend really necessary? I countered calmly. "You made your choices, James. Now you get to live with the consequences. Please leave my home now." "Your home? This is our home," he protested. "Check your email. My lawyer has been in touch with the mortgage company. Since my design business paid for the down payment and 60% of the monthly payments, plus I can document that you used our joint funds to finance your affair, the house will remain with me during divorce proceedings." It was a calculated risk, legally speaking, but one my lawyer felt confident about. As for Alison, her attempt to speak with me was met with cold silence. When she tried to follow me into the kitchen, my brother intercepted her. "I think you've done enough damage," he said firmly. "It's time for you to go." By 9 o'clock, the garden was empty, except for my brother and 2 close friends who stayed to help clean up. James had left, taking only an overnight bag, presumably to a hotel. Alison had been escorted out by a stony-faced Tyler, their relationship visibly shattered. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of what should have been a joyful gathering, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. I had publicly ended my marriage and my oldest friendship in one calculated move. The relief was palpable, but so was the grief. Despite their betrayal, there was still love there, now twisted into something painful and unrecognizable. My brother put his arm around my shoulders. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly. "They didn't leave you much choice." I nodded, too emotionally drained for words. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, but the victory felt hollow. I hadn't wanted any of this. I hadn't wanted to be the person who exposed secrets and ended relationships in front of an audience. But they had made me that person with their choices, and now we all had to live with the aftermath. The weeks following the confrontation were a blur of legal meetings, emotional processing, and rebuilding. James moved out permanently, taking only his personal belongings and items we had agreed upon through our lawyers. The divorce proceedings moved relatively quickly, as James had little ground to contest my claims with the mountain of evidence I had gathered. His desperate attempts to reconcile began almost immediately. The morning after the party, dozens of roses arrived at my door with a card begging for another chance. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home and threw away the card unread. Next came the emails, the voicemails, the handwritten letters slipped under my door, all variations on the same themes. He was sorry he had made a terrible mistake. He still loved me. We could work through this. His tone changed as the weeks passed, and he realized I was serious about the divorce. The pleas turned to anger, then to bargaining, offering to sign a post-nuptial agreement to attend counselling, anything to avoid the divorce and the professional consequences he was facing. His company had placed him on probation pending an investigation into his misuse of expense accounts and company time. Several clients had requested different representatives, uncomfortable with the questions about his integrity. Alison's attempts at reconciliation were even more pathetic. She showed up at my studio unannounced, eyes red from crying, clutching a photo album of our friendship history. 20 years has to count for something, she pleaded. People make mistakes, Georgine, terrible mistakes. But we've been through everything together. Not everything, I replied coldly. We haven't been through you sleeping with my husband and plotting to leave me. That's new territory. I never meant for any of this to happen, she insisted. We just connected during a vulnerable time and things escalated before I knew how to stop them. Things didn't escalate, Alison. You made choices repeatedly for months. You created alibis, made reservations, kept track of our schedules to find opportunities. That's not a mistake, that's a campaign. She had no response to that. There was no defense against the truth. When she realized I wouldn't budge, she left the album on my desk, as if our shared memories could somehow erase her betrayal. I donated it to the recycling bin as soon as she left. The divorce settlement ended up heavily in my favor. The judge was unsympathetic to James's attempts to claim equal division of assets given the documented misuse of marital funds for the affair. I kept the house, my business remained completely mine, and we split our investment accounts proportionally based on contributions. James's company reduced his territory and client list as punishment for the expense fraud, resulting in a significant income decrease for him. Alison suffered similarly steep consequences. Tyler ended their relationship immediately, moving out of their shared apartment that weekend. Her firm didn't fire her outright, but they removed her from several major accounts and passed her over for an expected promotion. The professional damage was compounded by social isolation, as most of our friend group sided with me or wanted nothing to do with either of them. The few mutual friends who maintained contact reported that she had moved to a smaller apartment and seemed to be struggling with depression. In contrast to their downward spirals, I focused on rebuilding and healing. I started therapy, working through the trauma of betrayal with a compassionate professional. The sessions were painful but necessary, helping me process my anger and grief without letting it consume me. I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing the inexcusable, but freeing yourself from the burden of carrying the hurt forever. I redecorated my house, removing traces of James and creating a space that reflected only my tastes and preferences. The master bedroom became an entirely new room with different furniture, paint colours, and linens, erasing the physical reminders of our shared intimacy. I converted his home office into a meditation and yoga space where I could practice the mindfulness techniques my therapist recommended. My business became my anchor during this turbulent time. I threw myself into new projects, channeling my emotional energy into creative solutions for clients. The work was therapeutic, giving me purpose and forward momentum when everything else felt uncertain. Somewhat ironically, my client base expanded significantly after the divorce drama, as several attendees of the confrontation party recommended my services to friends impressed by my strength and professionalism during such a difficult time. I also formed new friendships and strengthened existing ones outside the social circle I had shared with James and Alison. I reconnected with design school classmates, joined a book club, and even started taking a pottery class, surrounding myself with people who knew me as I was now, not as part of a failed marriage or betrayed friendship. 6 months after the confrontation, I ran into James at a restaurant. He looked thinner, tired, the confident pharmaceutical executive replaced by a man clearly struggling with the consequences of his actions. He asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed to a brief conversation. "I lost everything that mattered," he said quietly. "My marriage, my reputation, the respect of my colleagues. Was it worth it for your revenge?" "This wasn't about revenge, James. It was about consequences. You and Alison chose to betray the people who loved you most. The fact that there were consequences for those choices shouldn't be surprising. We made a terrible mistake," he admitted. "But did you have to destroy us so completely? Couldn't you have just divorced me quietly?" "You weren't planning to leave me quietly," I reminded him. "You and Alison were strategizing how to manage the fallout. Remember? Planning which friends would take, which sides. I just beat you to the punch with better execution." He had no response to that. After an uncomfortable silence, he asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, even friendship someday. I considered the question honestly before answering. "I don't hate you, James. Not anymore. But I don't trust you, and I never will again. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt." I wished him well and left feeling lighter than I had in months. As for Alison, our paths crossed at a mutual friend's wedding nearly a year after our friendship ended. She approached cautiously, clearly uncertain of her welcome. "You look good," she said, her eyes taking in my new haircut and the confidence that had replaced my former sadness. "I heard your business is thriving." "It is," I confirmed. "Life has a way of revealing where we should direct our energy." "How are you doing?" "Managing," she said with a slight shrug. "New job, new apartment. Lot of time to think about the choices I made. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I am truly sorry, Georgine, not just for the affair, but for betraying our friendship. That's the loss that haunts me most." There was genuine regret in her eyes, but it didn't change anything. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "But you're right, our friendship is one of the casualties of your choices. I hope you find peace, Alison, but it won't be through me." I walked away from that conversation, realizing that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. I had forgiven them both, not for their benefit, but for mine, releasing the anger that had threatened to consume me. But forgiveness didn't mean restoring trust or relationship. Some bridges remain burned, and that's okay. 1 year after the confrontation, my life had transformed completely. My design business had expanded to a larger studio with 5 employees. I had started dating again, cautiously at first, then, with growing confidence, eventually meeting a kind architect who respected boundaries and moved at a pace that felt comfortable to me. I had new friends, new hobbies, and a newfound appreciation for my own resilience. The greatest lesson I learned through this ordeal was about self-respect. When people show you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. No amount of history or shared memories can justify continued investment in relationships that have become toxic. Walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself and your well-being over the comfort of the familiar. I also learned that there is immense strength in standing in your truth, even when it's painful. I could have confronted James and Alison privately divorced quietly and maintained appearances. Instead, I chose transparency, refusing to carry the burden of their secrets or protect them from the natural consequences of their actions. That decision, while difficult, gave me a clean break and a solid foundation for rebuilding. My story doesn't have a neat, happy ending where all is forgiven and forgotten. Real life rarely works that way, but it does have growth, healing, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I faced betrayal with dignity and emerged stronger on the other side. Sometimes the most powerful lesson is that you can survive what once seemed unsurvivable and build something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. Has someone ever betrayed your trust? in a way that forced you to completely reevaluate the relationship? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember, the end of something significant is often the beginning of something better.